Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much, Kate, for the introduction, and thanks to all the previous presenters. It's been excellent. I really enjoyed some of the topics, and on a personal note, I was lucky enough to meet Jan Gal back in my day when I used to work in Auckland, and he did some work for us as well. It wasn't just in Australia. So it was really cool to see that work. But thanks everybody for coming. And so I'm going to talk a bit about neighborhoods and urban design and a whole bunch of other things. And I'm going to try to link, so I've stolen some of the graphics from Healthy Cities Guideline. So I'm going to start linking some of these things as you see as we progress through the slides, linking some of the work that we're doing at the City of Edmonton to link it with the Healthy City Guidelines. I'll talk a little bit about, in addition to urban design, universal design, and CEPTED, crime prevention through environmental design. And then Daniel's going to talk about transportation, infrastructure, and et cetera, and hopefully have some time for questions if I don't keep talking so much. So what is urban design? For those who don't know, urban design is about linking everything. And most of you probably get this graphic, so I'm not going to dwell on it. But I think the other key thing is to link those other things that we've been talking about, universal design and CEPTED as well. And that's what our team is focused on. And one of the things that we're focused on right now is creating an urban design manual. They come from the urban design principles. So those are our guiding principles, and I'll quickly go through those. They were developed a few years ago, and they link with city plan, the city plan document that the City of Edmonton completed a few years back. Excellent document, it's got a lot of great information in it, so feel free to have a look. And that's going to be that is our guiding document moving forward. And so the urban design team has come up with a set of guiding principles from an urban design perspective to link to those as well. The first one is authentic. So making sure that we build, our cities so they're truly authentic, right? They relate. We talked earlier about making sure that we relate to Indigenous peoples who came before us, and et cetera, and making sure we don't forget all the different cultures that make up our great cities and towns and villages and reserves. So we got to make sure that, to me, it's all just places, right? We got to focus on those places and making sure they're authentic. Inclusive as well. So that's the second principle, making sure that they're accessible to everybody, not just the able-bodied. So a lot of my focus is reviewing projects, applications, et cetera, to make sure that universal design is considered throughout. Walkable. Obviously, we've heard a lot about walkability. I will never stop talking about that because I walk most of my life. I grew up in downtown Toronto, walked everywhere, so walkability is important. Connected, that's our fourth principle, making sure obviously everything is connected through various different modes and systems. Healthy, obviously, that's why we're here, right? We're here to talk about creating a healthy city. And so healthy is one of our key guiding principles. And of course, vibrant, making sure that their cities are fun places to be. And I love the presentation that the City of Calgary showed about color. That's one thing when I first came to Edmonton. I've been with the city for about 7 years now. And a lot of the architecture and a lot of the neighborhoods are pretty boring. I hate to say it, right? A lot of tans, a lot of grays, a lot of whites. We need more color in our places. And so that's definitely one thing that we're really focusing on at the City of Edmonton to bring color. And you're going to see that in some of our new stations we're doing along some of the new LRT lines that are under construction and bus stations, which, and et cetera. And Daniel will talk about that later. So Urban Design Manual. What is the Urban Design Manual? Basically, you won't be able to get a copy of it, I'm sorry to say. It's not finished yet, but I don't think it'll ever be finished. The whole point of the document is to be a live document. So it'll be online. We're going to have a number of different sections. We have about 8 finished now. Hopefully they're going to be online very soon, and I'll let everybody know once they are, for sure. And so the whole purpose of the document is to talk about everything that makes up a city. So it's just what you see in the image, the structure of our city, our neighborhoods, our built form, the public realm, signs, and other detailed design elements that are on buildings and on our streets. All of that's going to be covered in this document. As I said, it's going to be a live document. It's going to have sections which are probably 4 or 5 pages long, so they're not arduous, right? You can have a quick look through them. Very simple. Now they're not standards; they're a guideline, But the point is, we're trying to educate a lot of the developers that we have, just like the city of Calgary is doing the same thing, it sounds, educating developers to ensure that we're designing buildings that fit with all these principles. This is just a quick snapshot of one of the ones we've recently finished. It's on our civic spaces. So I'm not going to bore you with all the detail, but you can see how it links with some of the points made in the Healthy City Guidelines. We're talking about civic spaces, how we design them. Obviously, lots of trees, lots of landscaping, making sure that there's connectivity in there, making sure you can get from place to place through if this is in downtown, or it's going to be in a number of our new nodes that we're creating. And that's the whole purpose of City Plan, is to not just focus on the downtown core, which we have been doing for a very long time. We have to start focusing on our suburban nodes as well, and making sure we design those so that people can get as many things done there. They don't always have to come downtown to live their lives. Another aspect of it, again, that part of educational opportunity, working with developers and other builders throughout the city, is our urban design brief. And that document's going to talk about, and you can look this is online already, so it talks about the project. So for focusing on a particular project that's happening somewhere in the city, making sure that the architects, the designers are going through a full project overview, providing a neighborhood analysis. So it's not just looking at their site, it's looking what's around the site, making sure they're linking to other things. And obviously what the design intent is. So all of those things will be part of the application process when they go to submit to planning coordination to get their applications approved. And I'll just flip over now to universal design. For those who don't know, the city created the Access Design Guide, which you can see there. We're on version 4 now, and we're going to be working on 5 soon. And so the whole point of this document is to make sure that all our city-owned buildings, facilities, parks, and spaces are universally accessible. Hopefully someday, fingers crossed, that we can apply these to everything else in the city, the private realm. But we're focused on the public realm right now, making sure we're doing a good job as a city so that we can definitely show developers that we're doing, how we're designing something to make sure that it's accessible. So obviously to encourage them to do the same. And here's some examples from pages in the Access Design Guide talking about the design of simple things like a loading zone along a street and a park bench, right? Simple stuff, but these are the elements that we got to make sure that when we're putting park benches into our city, parks and squares and everywhere throughout community spaces in our smaller neighborhoods, that we make sure that we put in benches that are actually accessible, right? Ones with backs and armrests, so all people can use them. It's not just some of the benches we've installed in the past that aren't always the most accessible. SEPTED is another thing. For people who don't know what SEPTED is, it's basically a philosophy trying to ensure that you're creating a built environment that is not only accessible, but also feels safe, right? It doesn't help to fully, eradicate crime, but it can help to make it a safer space. It's that whole eyes on the street perspective, making sure that when we design buildings, they actually front onto a street, and there's windows that front onto the street. And so for those who don't know, and when I say that, I also mean a number of City of Edmonton employees as well. We've had the design guide for safer cities since 1995. And I'm not sure, not many people at the city know about it. And it's a very good document. It's got some really good things in it. So what we're doing now, and I'm helping to lead this work, is we're renewing this document, which is very old. We're going to update it. And I'm stealing stuff from previous life in New Zealand. Those are the principles that we'll probably end up using, not guaranteed, but those are the principles that we'll probably be using in our new document that the city's going to have for our new SEPTED document. So it's not just focused on, eradicating crime, putting up lots of fencing and cameras and strong lighting. It's actually about building decent communities, right? It's to get people active on the street and the eyes on the street. And that just makes a place and a space safer. And so hopefully the next time I get to present that new document. It's probably going to take us a while, but I'm looking forward to presenting about the SEPTED design guide in the near future. So if anybody have any questions, we'll talk about it later for sure.
Thanks, Robert. That was great. Did I do that right? Okay, yeah, we've heard this already, but why do we focus on transportation or non-motorized transportation? Why do we try and get people out of their cars and walking, biking, taking transit? We're all here to talk about health. I think often people, forgive me if this is wrong, but often people think about incorporating daily physical exercise into their commute, as one way to do that, the social connectedness. And I just want to point out the really obvious big picture, also the amount of people that are killed and seriously injured by automobile accidents as well. There's a very large and immediate health impact of our over-reliance on transportation. So it's the small everyday stuff that's really crucially important, and it's a really massive problem. This is maybe a bit stark, but if there was any other public program that killed as many people as a transportation program, we would never have a rec center again. We would never have. It is really strange that that is sort of a socially acceptable amount of injury and impact to community that we allow on a transportation network. So it's a bit stark, intended to get your attention ever so slightly. But there are other reasons too, and there are different reasons that speak to obviously different audiences, health being the focus here today. If you're advocating, and I would encourage you to do so, to advocate for what you think and feel are important, to speak to your political leaders, your councillors, your city staff. Like from working in the public and getting asked about why are we doing this project? Why are we putting it in bike lanes? These are sort of the big reasons. It's accessible. Everybody drives, right? It's like, well, unless you're under 16, you can't drive yourself, or unless you're older and your license was taken away because your abilities are reduced, or unless you have change, like unless you've been in unironically a car accident and can't operate a vehicle anymore, unless you can't afford one. And we slowly are leaving out more and more of the population. Cars are very expensive. Pollution, it's been talked about already. Amount of sulfur dioxides, nitrous dioxides, and greenhouse gases that are emitted by single occupant motor vehicle transportation is quite large and impacting our environment. Won't go on for that one for a while, or it's been talked about already. Our urban form and the sort of efficiency of the transportation network is something as well. In Edmonton here, we're expecting 2 million people to be here, and up to 1.25, coming in the next 7 or 8 years. 1.25 million people. And if we're going to densify, we quite frankly don't have the room until, to provide access, to connect communities, to provide that social connection in the amount of space that we need. So we need to be more efficient. That's really engineering to say. I'm one of those, aforementioned people with a traffic-y planner background. But yeah, in terms of pure efficiency, the amount of space required for automobile transportation just quite frankly isn't going to work. We need to focus on mass transit. We need to focus on walking and cycling, which are quite a bit more space efficient. Attracting talent and our global reputation is another. Probably the most public version of this is the Amazon HQ, bid that came out a while ago. One of the criteria was access to active transportation, access to bike lanes, and access to mass transit. But these are conversations I have frequently with people in my role in transit. I'm going to develop this site. When are you going to bring transit there? That's required for access to our site. To get workers to site. And that, if you're from the Edmonton region, you've probably heard a little bit about regional transit as well. And a lot of that was about, pursuing a model for regional transit was about reputation and being able to market to developers to attract business to Edmonton. So a little bit of why. Know your audience, know some of those things when you're talking. What can we do? What can we do with that? Some of these problems seem large. We did a little bit of research in transit to think about what we can do. We have some levers that we can pull on, some external, that are sort of bigger than the city or bigger than me, maybe bigger than you, that, are going to be really hard to move. Things like broader economy, health status of folks, land use, demographics. Some of those we can influence, but don't have as much direct influence. But I want to point out that the four, at least in the transit world, that we can work on that are in control of the city, largely service design and the amount of service, how we fare, and how we collect revenue, what our fares, how we're set, safety and security, and the amenities and accessibility. And of those, the single largest determinant of transit ridership that we found is the amount of service that we provide. And so this is a little bit of field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. If you provide it, people will use it. And I won't tell you what I think about that, but maybe you'll guess really soon what I think about that notion. So here's one, just going to talk about, this is maybe heralding back to Robert's SEPTED. This is our old stadium LRT station. You can, and the reason the photo is not amazing, but I have this same photo from the same spot not that long ago. Safety and security, being I will say an increasingly front of mind concern for many transit agencies across North America, related to opioid crisis, related to housing and homelessness, related to other sociodemographic factors out there. People are using shelters to shelter, using transit centers to shelter in, and people are using transit centers for crime internationally. So this site required you to walk, from sort of heading into the screen, down the stairs into a bit of a tunnel that is sort of warm, but then it's sort of a closed off space where you have a little waiting area. There's some nooks and crannies, and then you would go up to the platform, but you can't even see the platform surface from where you're standing when you access the station. So from today, it's a little bit more color. Maybe not tons, but there's some yellow there. You can see the platform surface. You can walk up. You can see the whole site. There's also a bathroom on site. Provide a little bit of dignity, and for folks that are in the space, public space, with a chance to be human as well. This station went from one of our top 5 areas of security concerns to the last. So with this renewal, has, I don't know how to understate this, but a really, really significant improvement in the safety and security performance of this space. 85% of the people, and for you researchers, 85% maybe feels like a B and not that great, but for civic score, that's an amazing amount of feedback. 85% of people have stated they feel safer in the space, they feel more invited, and they're more likely to use the space. Was between 83 and 86% for all 3 of those stats. So feeling really positive about this station redesign. This is something, that working through SEPTED design guidelines and urban design guidelines, and applying that knowledge that people in your city, if you're not from Edmonton, if people like Robert have to apply those principles to our design is crucial to improve the outcome, sort of the broader social outcomes and access to transit. So yeah, when we renew spaces, we can use things like urban design guidelines and have a really positive impact on the accessibility of our transit network. What else can we do? We have a safe mobility strategy, and people are still going to drive. That's going to be a major component of our transportation network, but we can make our transportation system safer. And we need to do that in a number of ways. We need to make sure that we have a community of safe communities, so people feel safe in the places where they are, if that's their neighborhood or their street or their school. And that isn't just about engineering factors, in case you're one of those people that thinks that way. I have an engineering background and tend to think about, measures, but part of that is about the process of having that conversation and bringing community together, to do the stuff about the safer streets and the implementation work that they've done in Calgary, bring the community together to have those ideas. We've done some of that in Edmonton as well, and understand what the community needs, and then go do that and bring people together along the way to do that. We also learned through this process that we need to be safer for everyone, and part of the work that we did was through an equity analysis to understand, who is safest and who is being impacted the most by our transportation network. And I sort of, perhaps unsurprisingly, but also hate to say it, the people that were impacted the most were lower socioeconomic status neighborhoods. That's where we were seeing the highest amount of collisions, which was almost inversely proportional to the people who were providing feedback to the city through the regular means. So the higher socioeconomic status neighborhoods providing the most amount of feedback, the most amount of insight into their communities, which really led us to, we got to focus and we have to find new ways to engage with those community members to find out what they need, what their transportation needs are. And I will say also over-impacted cyclists and pedestrians have more impacted by transportation network, in really negative ways mentioned earlier. And you might ask, does it work? And the answer is dramatically yes. The amount of people killed and seriously injured has been decreasing in the city of Edmonton, since 2015. Not all of that is obviously going to be on the cities, at our cities doing, increased seatbelt use, increased, better braking, better vehicles also contributes a great deal to that. But other things, really significant outcomes that we've had in the city of Edmonton are reduced speed limits in neighborhoods. And while politically, quite an effort and quite a policy effort to deliver that, it's fairly cost effective if your measure is safety outcomes, or health outcomes. Building facilities as well. To build them safer, you get safer outcomes, build them more inviting, get more community members using them. This is a downtown bike network. This is an idea, quite bluntly, we stole from Calgary, or rather our council stole from Calgary. In July, it was July, and council passed a motion to go build downtown bike network as quickly as possible. And I'm quite pleased to say that in under a year, we went and did that. So that was from initiation of the idea, brought a report back to council 2.5 months later. I got, secured funding for it. And before Canada Day, before July of the next year, had implemented 7.6 kilometers of bike infrastructure for about $4.8 million. So all quickly implemented, rapid design, and just quickly wanted to point out, why did that happen? Again, that was a dedicated group of community members who advocated to council to do this. And our goals with that program, was to increase the number of people cycling, to provide those opportunities for people to have daily physical exercise, to increase the proportion of female cyclists, decrease the number of cyclist-related injuries, and increase the number of positive user experiences. We evaluated that about a year in. We saw some improvement in the gender split, so some equity increases. Overwhelmingly, for both cyclists and for drivers, found positive reaction to the design in that there was more likely for cyclists to be cycling in the bike lanes and drivers more familiar with how cyclists would behave. We'll say that does not mean that everybody supported the project, but for the people using it who were asked on site if they felt safer and more clear, they did. And just want to point out our user statistics. So after the bike lanes opened, we didn't install counters before. This was quite rapidly done. We had about 300 daily AM peak trips, and a year in, that rose to about 800, and this was pulled yesterday, are in the 3,000. So quite an increase in, I will say that we've continued to invest in cycling to the point where I just immediately came from meeting on how we're going to spend $100 million in cycling over the next 4 years, whatever our priorities. So, the investment continues, but if I could tie that back to, I guess, a bit of the Field of Dreams, invested in cycling, built facilities that were safe, that, used our sort of globally the best examples of design, evaluated it like all the, like most of the, what you've heard already on how to best evaluate designs, and we've had overwhelming success in user experience. With that, I will end my presentation, I think on time.